Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to talk about Sylvia Plath and the use of Holocaust imagery in her poems, Daddy and Lady Lazarus in specific. But before I start, I want to clarify a few things. First of all, I took some notes, so if I'm not looking at the camera, it is because I'm looking at my laptop, so now you know. Second of all, I never studied Sylvia Plath or her work at university. This is my research. This video is actually inspired by a paper that I presented at a conference a few years ago, and I used that paper to prepare this video. I'm going to share the references that I use at the end of this video if you are interested. And lastly, I'm not going to analyze the poems as if we were in a class. I'm going to talk about some themes, some important passages, but I'm not going to talk about the entire poem. So, Sylvia Plath was not Jewish. She was born in 1932 and she was about 7 years old when the Second World War started, meaning that she didn't have any emotional connection with the conflict, which makes it a lot harder for anyone who tries to analyze her poems. And the use of Holocaust imagery in her poems. Both poems, Lady Lazarus and Daddy, were written during her last autumn, and they sort of immortalize her name in the academic and literary Anglo-American circle. Yet both poems face still today harsh criticism on the exaggerated use of violent images of torture and death. George Steiner, a well-known literary critic, celebrated Plath's work initially, but later he questioned her ethics. Steiner questioned the existence of a reason that would justify the use of the Holocaust, and Plath identifying herself as one of the victims. And now I'm quoting, "What extraterritorial right had Sylvia Plath," Steiner demands, "to draw on the reserves of animated horror in the ash and the children's shoes?" To put the point simple, it matters to Steiner who Plath was, because he is interested not in her biography, but in finding a moral justification for the poetry. In Steiner's view, because Plath is not a Jew, she cannot justify her use of Holocaust imagery. Steiner defends the premise that the use of cultural memories, such as Second World War, is justified only when the author shares an ethnic or religious connection to the event. However, given the Holocaust's historical importance, Steiner supports his thesis with the need of experience, meaning that if the poem is a representation of the poet's personal life or a relative or friends, that would be, that would mean that the author had reasons to do it, had reasons to use Holocaust in their work. But in the case of Sylvia Plath, though semi-biographical, they are not comparable, or her experiences rather, are not comparable at all with the experiences that millions of people had to go through in concentration camps. Sylvia Plath actually recognizes her lack of experiences when it comes to death or torture in the hands of others. She actually has a diary entry when she says, "What do you know about sorrow? No one I loved has ever died or been tortured." Even though she had to deal with her father's death, Otto Plath, she was actually prevented from going to the funeral, and she never actually reconciled with her father. She never went through the process of mourning and getting closure, meaning that it actually affected her a lot, because during the following years, she would be very unstable, due to suicide attempts and depression. And even though these were traumatic events, they are not comparable to the experiences of someone that lived during the Holocaust. A lot of people question the use and if her purpose was just for shock value. George Steiner actually challenges people to consider if Plath would be as celebrated as she is today if she had not used Holocaust imagery in her poems. And this is a very important question, and it makes us think about this topic, because even though I appreciate Sylvia and I appreciate the bell jar, it was very important to me growing up, and I enjoy some of her poetry, it still makes me very uncomfortable. When I conducted this research, it made me feel very uncomfortable, and still, I still feel very uncomfortable about this, and I question if it was appropriate or not what she did. To Plath, our personal experiences shouldn't be private. She thought that we should unite ourselves and share as a way to unite quote-unquote victims. And for that to happen, a poet should have the ability to manipulate different extremes. She actually stated at an interview, and I'm going to quote, "One should be able to control and manipulate experiences like madness, being tortured, and one should be able to manipulate these experiences to the ignorant mind. I think that personal experiences shouldn't be a kind of shut box and a mirror-looking narcissistic experience. I believe it should be generally relevant." So it sort of feels like she used a collective historical connection, memory, as a way to expose her experiences, looking for our understanding, the people on the outside of the circle. And many reckon that the use of Holocaust imagery is justified because it was an historical event that affected humankind, regardless of personal connection, because an event like this would transcend time and space and no one would have forget it, and it affected everyone. And so a lot of people think that it is appropriate and justified, and there's no reason for people to feel uncomfortable because she used Holocaust imagery. Despite of shock value, Plath wanted to unite victims and share traumatic experiences as a way to raise awareness to people's different life experiences, I guess. Yet sharing her experiences raises a lot of questions in terms of identity, because the only visible connection would be her German heritage on her father's side. But in her poems, the poetic subject presents themselves as Jewish and being persecuted by German soldiers. Alvarez, who worked with Sylvia and knew Sylvia, defended her ability to write about her experiences and make them part of a collective. And he said, "She is not just talking about her own private suffering. Instead, it is the very closeness of her pain which gives it a general meaning. Through it, she assumes the suffering of all the modern victims. Above all, she becomes an imaginary Jew." And I don't feel comfortable with this, and I don't think it is appropriate to say it. I would like your opinion on it. Maybe because it was the most recent historical event at the time, or one that would never be forgotten. Like they said, that no one would ever forget what happened. Plath wanted to create a connection with modern victims, meaning people that lived during the Holocaust. Some of them survived, some of them didn't. And Alvarez supports Plath comparing the poetic subject to a Jewish person in a concentration camp. And he says, "And what matters in them is not so much the physical torture, but the way modern techniques can be used to destroy utterly the human identity." So there is semi-biographical content in both Daddy and Lady Lazarus, we have established that. In Lady Lazarus, for instance, the suicide attempts reminds us of Sylvia's own attempts after losing her father. And let's say that this woman, the poetic subject, let's say it's a woman, she is responsible for the first two, but the third attempt, and she is actually killed during the third attempt, happens as a sort of a show to entertain a male oppressive society that is persecuting her. There are several interpretations about this male oppressive society, and most of them tend to associate them with her father and Ted Hughes, and these are being portrayed as Nazi soldiers. The Holocaust imagery is intensified with the description of her death. I'll have the passage here. It is gruesome, very explicit, and if we consider the fact that she is using the Holocaust as a sort of inspiration for this poem, it makes it a lot more, you will feel a lot more uncomfortable. Many believe that this poem is about revenge because of the last line, in which she says, "Out of the ash I rise with my red hair and I eat men like air." In Daddy, though, the poetic subject's love-hate relationship with her father is very obvious, but it is subtle. Some themes that are very important in this poem are her German heritage, her dislike of the German language because Plath was never able to speak it properly, and the symbol one great toe, which is related to her father's death due to diabetes. Alvarez argues again that this poem is subtle, and is related to self-control and vengeance. What she does in the poem is, with a weird detachment, to turn the violence against herself so as to show that she can equal her oppressors with her self-inflicted oppression. And this is the strategy of concentration camps. She eventually is able to get away from her first oppressor, her dad. In the poem, we analyze this first oppressor as her dad. We recognize him as her dad. But then she finds a second one and she actually marries him, and she says, "I made a model of you, a man in black, in a Mein Kampf look." Now, I am of the opinion that one should not look at confessional poetry and think that they're going to learn more about the poet's personal life. There is semi-biographical content, yes, but we don't know to what extent. It is very hard to understand it completely and be able to separate things, what's fiction and what's not fiction. In this case, with these two poems, these are two of her most popular poems. I don't know if you ever consider the fact that she uses a lot of Holocaust imagery, or if you just thought of it as just being violent imagery but not actually related to the Holocaust. It is something that, after I conducted this research a few years ago when I was at that conference, it made me feel really uncomfortable. I still appreciate Sylvia Plath's work. I still appreciate her art. The bell jar is still very important to me. This was very important to me growing up. I really like this book. I read it 2 years ago, I believe. Obviously, it's not a perfect book. I had a couple of things to say last time I read it. But still, it is still important to me. But her poems, I never actually studied them. And maybe if I did, I would feel differently or not. I'm not sure. Because this was just my own research. I didn't read everything about this topic. But I have to admit that it makes me feel very uncomfortable. I understand that maybe she had a purpose, but I think that at some point she forgot about it. There are a lot of shock value features in these poems. I think a lot of them didn't have to be that explicit. But then again, I didn't write them, so I don't know. I don't know what was going through her head. What do you think? Do you think it was appropriate to use Holocaust imagery? Do you think Sylvia Plath crossed the line when she exaggerated a little bit with her use of Holocaust imagery, with comparing herself to a victim of the Holocaust, comparing her personal traumatic experiences with those of someone that lived during the Holocaust? They had to go through that maybe survived and maybe they didn't. Do you think that was appropriate or not, and why? I would love to have this conversation with you. I'm already being very clear about where I stand. I feel uncomfortable. I feel that it wasn't completely appropriate. I can see what she tried to say when she said that she wanted to call people's attention in a way, because she mentioned something that everybody would know and people would just be automatically drawn to it. Okay, she's talking about something that I know. I didn't go through it, but I can imagine. Still, is it appropriate to do so? My question is, did she cross the line when she used Holocaust imagery in her poems? What is your opinion? Again, I'm not saying that I hate Sylvia Plath now. I still love The Bell Jar, very important book to me growing up. I still appreciate a lot of her poems. I'm not going to say that I love all of them. I'm just sharing, my feelings about it. I'm just sharing my sort of opinion, almost. It's not really an opinion. I'm just saying that I feel uncomfortable, and I think that it wasn't completely appropriate what she did. But then again, I'm not sure. Do you agree with George Steiner that there are just some things that you're not supposed to mention, that you're not supposed to use for your own, even if you think you have a good purpose, are there some things that you're not supposed to use, regardless of your purpose, regardless of your aim? Do you think that she justified her use of Holocaust imagery when she said that she wanted to bring victims closer together and share traumatic experiences? Do you think that's a good enough reason? Those are my questions. I would love to know your opinion on this. I know that this is a very sensitive subject. I just wanted to present two different points of view. So you have George Steiner's idea and perspective, and then you have Al Alvarez's opinion. And I would like to know your opinion now about this topic. I am going to share the list of references at the end of this video if you are interested. I don't know if you like these videos or not, because this is not really about a specific book, or I mean, I talk about two poems, but I don't really analyze them. But yeah, do you like these sort of videos, you know, more based on research and just opinions and referencing people? I don't know. I would love to film more videos like this, but only if you enjoy them. Otherwise, there's no point in filming these videos. So that's it for today. I hope you are safe, and I hope that everybody you love is safe and well. And I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.